Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Chapter 19. We are going to be talking about chemical reactions, and today you are going to get the first step towards balancing chemical equations. Okay, chemical equations are how you write chemical reactions down, but there are certain things you need to know before you start balancing the chemical equations. Okay, so we're at part one. First off, a subscript is a number in a molecular formula. Remember, this is the formula, and it tells how many atoms of the element to the left. So this 2 is dealing with hydrogen, and that 2 does not affect the O for oxygen. Okay, so what that tells us is that there are 2 hydrogen. Now, you'll notice there is no number by the O. If there is no subscript, it means that there is only one atom. Okay, just like in math class when you have an X and there's nothing in front of it, it is assumed that there is one of them. Okay, so you end up with one oxygen. Now, the thing is, when you're doing balancing of chemical equations, you cannot change or add subscripts to the molecular formula. They have to stay the way they are. The formula as you see it determines what substance it is. So you cannot change it to something else. If I decides to put a 2 right here by the oxygen, instead of water, I would have hydrogen peroxide. So you cannot change those numbers. The subscripts must stay as they are when you're balancing. Okay, now if a subscript is to the right of atoms in parentheses, and you can see that right here, it multiplies all the elements in the parentheses. Now, that means that magnesium over here is not affected by the number 2. So you only have one magnesium. Okay, because there's no subscript here, it means there's one. Now, the 2, remember, multiplies everything. So it's going to multiply the oxygen, and you'll end up with 2 oxygen because there's nothing here, so it means there's a 1 times 2 to give you 2. The 2 also multiplies the hydrogen, so you end up with 2 hydrogen. Okay? Now, if you have a subscript inside and outside of the parentheses, the subscript outside, in this case 2, multiplies the subscript inside. It works the same way. Whatever's on the outside multiplies everything inside the parentheses. Okay, and remember, it does not affect anything that's not in the parentheses. So Pb, which is lead, there is just 1. Sulfur, you can see it has nothing, so it's a 1 times 2 to give you 2 sulfur. Now the oxygen has a 4. So that means that you have 2 times 4 to give you 8 oxygen total. Okay, 1 lead, 2 sulfur, and 8 oxygen. Now, in front of a molecular formula, you could have what's called a coefficient. And this goes in front of the formula, and it tells how many of this molecule you have. So this 2, the coefficient, multiplies the entire molecule right here. Okay? Now, these are the only things you're going to be able to change, is these coefficients when you're doing balancing. But you got to remember how to count everything. Okay, so Pb, lead, had 1. Now it's multiplied by the coefficient, so you get 2 lead. Sulfur was 1. This 2, the subscript out here, multiplies it, so that gives you 2 sulfur times 2 to give you a total of 4 sulfur. Now, oxygen had 4 times 2 gives you 8 times 2 gives you a total of 16 oxygen in this process. Okay, so you have the subscripts that only talk about what goes right in front of it to the left. You have subscripts outside parentheses that multiply everything within the parentheses. And you have coefficients that can be changed because it tells how many of this entire molecule you have. Okay? You need to be able to do this. Make sure you remember the rules. You cannot balance chemical equations if you don't figure out how to count the different elements. If you have questions, make sure that you ask questions. Okay? So you'll get some practice, and I'll talk to you next time.